nerds, Big Tommy T here, and today we're talking about Whirling Witchcraft, and boy, is this game like a unique, weird, wacky, fun, silly game, but is it great?
That's a good question.
So at its core, this is a drafting and engine building game where you're going to be drafting cards that all have, they're all recipe cards essentially, so they have like a little engine on them. You spend the resources at the top to get the resources at the bottom, but you do not gain the resources on the bottom. The resources on the bottom will then go into your little cauldron thing and get passed to another player. And when that player has too many resources to hold on their board, they bust, they overflow, whatever. That is essentially points for you, and the first person to get 5 points wins the game. So it is a pretty unique concept because, again, you want to have all the resources so you can run your engine, but you don't want to have too many. And of course, you want to give another player a bunch of resources so that they bust, but you don't want to give them like the right kind of resources so that they can run their engine. It's very interesting. There are a couple more details about the game that are a bit unique. Like when you draft these cards and you pass them, so you have a hand of cards, you pick one, and then you pass, you actually pass in the opposite direction of the player that you're trying to affect, right? So like I'm going to pass these cards to the left, and then I'm going to run my engine. All of the stuff at the bottom of the cards is going to go in my little cauldron, which is a nice, cool feature, even if they don't stay together super well. But I'm going to pull these tokens into my cauldron, and that gets passed to the player to my right. And there's also something called arcane. It's these three little symbols that could potentially be at the top of different cards. Whenever you get those symbols, whenever you draft a card that has those symbols, you get to advance the arcane little thing on your little card there, and when you get to an even number of them, you get to trigger their abilities. And those abilities aren't written anywhere on like any player aid, they're just in the rulebook, so I have to like leave the rulebook open for everybody to remind everybody what those three abilities are. I mean, it's only three, right? So eventually you're going to remember them, but it still seems like a silly thing to not include on the player aids, which are included in the game. Like, you get player aids, but those aren't on them. So everybody also starts with special player powers, and there's ways where you can, like, I think there are some where everybody can have the exact same starting power, and I've never done that. I only ever, hand out the unique ones, which is either a specific, like, power itself, or it is like a starting recipe card. And those are really fun. I always like that aspect in games in general. I like starting with variable player powers, and this game has some really good ones. But of course there are some negatives to the game, and obviously the biggest negative is randomness. Like, this is just an awful lot of chaos. Semi-controlled chaos, but still at the end of the day, if you win, you might feel like it was just because the cards felt like white and black resources are much more rare, so it's easy if you happen to get a lot of cards that produce white or black, right, and you're overflowing your opponent, well, it's less likely that they are going to get cards that will use those or remove them or something, So like if you win that way, which is a pretty big strategy, is to go for black or white, especially if your starting player power has something to do with it or something like that, it's pretty good strategy. It's hard to avoid it because, again, statistically speaking, that's just fewer cards in the deck, so it's less likely that they'll be able to eat those resources that you're giving them. And because, like, your engine is dependent on another player, right, you could be like, oh, they're producing a lot of green, so I'm going to play a lot of cards that use green, so I can run a big engine, I can use all the green that they're giving me, and then they just stop producing green. They're like, well, if he's going to use all the green, I'm just not going to produce it and starve him that way, So it's a lot of wacky, random, crazy, but it is fun. It's an overall enjoyable experience. Even when you lose, I won my first 3 games of this in a row, and I was like, boom, I'm never playing this again. 100% win streak. And then I played it 2 more times and lost both times, but I still had a good time, even while losing. It's wacky and fun and silly, and there is strategy to it, but this is not a game for people who want to sit down and really math out their turn and have a really good strategic experience. This is more Munchkin than it is Tapestry. Another big benefit for this game is I do believe it works well at a lot of different player counts. Like, I've played this at 2, 3, and 5 players, and it works really well in all of them. The 2-player game is a little bit different, but still good. And so I do enjoy this game. I did enjoy it every time I played it. It's wacky and silly and fun. Again, I want to emphasize it's really fun. It's not strategic brain burneriness, and that's good. I like games like that, but I've played it 5 times now, and I kind of feel like I'm done with it. I get what the game's doing. I've figured it out, so to speak, and I'm kind of over it, I guess. Like, again, it's a tough decision because I do like the game, but it's very iffy if it's gonna stay in my collection. I might just give it away to somebody else. And part of that is because I liked the game but didn't love it. Another part of it is just I'm running out of space. But anywho, I'm gonna put a link in the description box down below so you can purchase this game if this sounds interesting to you. Also down there is a link for Game Toppers, so they're sponsored for Neverboard Gaming. Also down there is a button that says subscribe. You know what to do with it. Subscribe and you'll never be bored. Oh yeah. Whirling Witchcraft.